Okay, we went over a few weeks ago what your design document is going to look like for your project, and it is the first four parts of it are in Word. The first two sections are written. The second two sections are diagrams with maybe some explanatory text. And I want to focus on the wireframe because the wireframe is just a basic sketch of what the basic layout of a page is going to look like. So a wireframe could look like this. There's the page. We have the heading on the top, the header on the top. We have the body. Oh, I forgot something. We have the nav over here. Then we have the body, and then we have a footer. That could be a basic wireframe. And you don't need a wireframe for every individual page. Many pages can share the same wireframe. So for example, if this was the news page, the body would consist of the news. If this was the biography page, this would consist of the biography of the person, the body. So usually these three sections are going to be the same across every page. And this is going to be the section that is different from each page. All right, different from page to page. Now you might have a couple of wireframes though. You might have your home page laid out slightly differently than the rest of the pages, or there might be a special page that for some reason you decide to lay it out differently. But it may be acceptable to have one wireframe for all your pages, especially on a small website such as the one that we're doing for our project. Now, another common wireframe would be something like this. Header, navigation, body, and footer. Okay, that would be another common wireframe that you might have for a web page. Now, we're going to talk about the process. Well, you have your wireframe. Now it's time for you to make the prototype. Now, the prototype is going to be actual web pages. So you'll create 3 sample web pages, zip them up, and zip up the associated files and upload them. So how are you going to do this? First thing you're going to do is you're going to develop a template. You're going to develop a template that contains these 3 sections because these 3 sections are going to be common on every page. Once you develop that template, then you're going to clone that template over and over again for the specific pages. So I have an example, and then you make whatever changes that you need to each individual page. So I have an example that walks through this process. And in this example, I'm going to have several versions of this example. And keep in mind that in this example, the HTML is identical from page to page. I'm using an external style sheet, so if I change the style sheet, all the pages, if I change them just one place, all the pages will get that change. So let's look at the example that I have. Version of the prototype. And I first of all developed a template. And that template contains the header, navigation, and the footer. Now I put in here just some placeholder content. This will get replaced by the specific content on the specific pages. So this section will be identical, this section will be identical, and this section will be identical on every page. Then we have this big section in the center that will get changed on each specific page that we have. All right, So I made this page, a template. I got everything set. What I'm going to do then after that is I'm going to clone that template and come up with the individual pages. So I'm going to copy that template and create Hawaii.html, Iceland.html, index.html by 3 prototype pages. Let's look at the HTML for the template, the HTML code. Pretty basic. It's what we have been doing all along. That is, we have our HTML document that contains a head section. The head section contains a title, which every web page should have a title. It contains a link to the style sheet, and it contains something new. It contains a link to Google Fonts. Now, we'll cover that aspect of it in a little bit. So just keep in mind that this relates to downloading a Google font that we're going to use on our site. So that's our head section. We have our body section that contains the header, the navigation being an unordered list, each list item consisting of a link. Now, all my pages are in the same folder, so I just have the name of the page, index.html. I don't have something like C:// user / bu203 / desktop / I don't have all that stuff in front of it, and you shouldn't either. If it's in the same folder, you just put the name of the file. Then I have my link. And then I have the text that you click on for the link. This is all in UL. Now remember, ULs look a certain way. They look like a bulleted list. By default, they look like a bulleted list. We can change that to look any way we want. So for example, on this page, we've changed it not to be a bulleted list, but to look like a list of items going across like that. Section, I have an unordered list in there just to demonstrate what an unordered list would look like. I have some paragraphs. I use Greek text on here, which again, if you can, if you're doing a prototype, it's okay to have Greek text. If you're doing a finished project, you would not have Greek text on it. So the only time in this class you're allowed to use Greek text is on your prototype. And you can generate multiple paragraphs of it. It's Google Greek text generator. You get this, and you can say, this explains Greek text, what it's used for. It's been used since the 1500s. If we're coming up with a layout of something, we might want to see how it looks with actual words in it, even if the words are nonsense words. So I can say, give me 5 paragraphs, start with lorem ipsum. And we click that, and there's our 5 paragraphs. So I pasted that inside the section, the main section, and I think I only used 3 paragraphs. I did make one of the paragraphs have the class of important. So remember that for a while. We'll come back to that when we look at the CSS file. Finally, I have my footer. I give it an ID of credits. Class and ID are 2 different things. Multiple things on the page can have the same class, but only one thing on a page can have a given ID. And then I have a credit where I say where I got the background image from. It's important to, just as in a term paper, it's important to cite your sources. It's important to cite your sources when you're developing a web page. So if you use images from somewhere, be sure to put credits somewhere on your web pages. I put it in the footer. If you want to, you can have a separate page for your credits. This is a neat little special character. Starts with ampersand, has the word copy, and then a semicolon. There's a whole set of special characters in HTML. And if you look in this case, it shows up as the copyright symbol. So if you want the symbol for euros, for example, if you're doing a European site and you want the symbol for euros instead of dollars, we can Google HTML special characters and see them. Here's some mathematical expressions, Greek letters, euro, so on. Full symbol reference is listed here, and it shows you all the different symbols that you can have in HTML. So we covered quite a few things in this example. All right. Our most fun is going to start when we look at the CSS for this. And we're going to go through this pretty much line by line and examine the contents of the CSS file. All right, first thing I have is I have body, background image, URL, background tile .png. Notice this is not a website. You should not hot link to an image. By hot link, I mean actually put the URL, complete URL, including HTTP in there and point to someone else's server. If you want to use a file that exists somewhere, download the file. And since it just says background-tile.png, I know that that is in the same folder as my web pages. So there's background tile. Here are all my web pages. Font family, Helvetica, Arial, Sans Serif. We talked about font family before. Usually you have more than one font listed. Typically they're all of the same type. That is sans serif or serif. Now we said this is a sans serif font because if you look at it, let's look at a big letter, or let's look at this letter. That L, make it bigger, doesn't have any of the little things on the side of the letter. Unlike Zeller's, which has the little notches sort of at the end. Those things are called serifs. And again, we're following the basic guideline of putting serif fonts on our headings, but using sans serif font for the bulk of the text. Reason there are more than one is not every machine has every font on it. And therefore we can list the fonts in order that we want to use. This will first try to use Helvetica. Helvetica is sometimes not available on a Windows machine, or I don't think it is available on a Windows machine. And therefore, we're not going to use Helvetica there. We're going to use Arial. So if Helvetica font is not found, we will use the next font on the list, which is Arial. And Arial was created to be a Helvetica clone. So the page will look very much the same then both on a PC and a Mac. Finally, if you are on Linux or some other platform that doesn't have those other two fonts, you'll use the generic sans serif font. Okay. I then apply the box model. What's the box model? Well, boxes have widths. And the width of the box is the size of the text area in the box. So 600 pixels means that all the way across this is 600 pixels. Margin 0, auto. What that's going to do is, again, we go like a clock. 0 is the top margin. Auto is the right margin. 0 again is the bottom margin. Auto is the left margin. What that's going to do is that's going to put no margin on the top or bottom for this, but it will automatically center this within the window size. So as notice as I make it bigger, it centers it. Keeps it centered no matter what the size. If I get to be too small, well, it's not going to cut off. If I define a width of 600, it's not going to cut it off. Oh, again, the way around that is to put a percentage in, and we'll come to that in later examples. Padding is 15 pixels. Padding is the space between the edge of the box or the border of the box and where the text starts. So we define that as being 15 pixels. Background white, text align center. That puts the text right smack dab in the middle of the box. The border is solid, black, 2 pixels. Now, I did that all in one property, border. I could have said border style solid, border color black, border width 2 pixels, but I can put it all as border property, and it's smart enough to go and say, well, solid must mean the style of the border. Black must mean the color. 2 pixels must be the width. I then put in a border radius, and that creates the curved border. And 55 is kind of a high number, so it's very curved. It's almost like a circle. If I were to lower that number to say 15, notice it becomes much more boxy and less circular. So the radius of the border is smaller. Put it back to where it was. Now you can specify a different border on the top, on the left, on the bottom, and the right simply by saying border dash top or border dash bottom. That sometimes could be effective. That's effective, like, let's say if you wanted a line underneath a box. But generally, most examples I do will use the same border going in all 4 directions. Okay, H1 then. We define H1 having a font family Garamond and serif. So therefore, any of the H1 tags on this page, wherever they appear, I think that's the only H1 we have, we'll get the different fonts. We'll get the Garamond and the serif fonts. So that's what we see up here. If I were to put an H1 in the section, that will also get those fonts. If I put an H2 here, Well, an H2 is not an H1. Therefore, we get the cascade down from the style rule that is in the in the body tag. So if, again, think of it as these tags contain other tags. So when I say body font family that, everything inside the body is going to get that rule unless I overrule it with a more specific rule. In this case, when I put in the rule for H1, that is overrules the rule for this font, but only for H1s. Since I don't have an H2 style rule in here, then H2 gets the same style rule as the rest of the body. All right, my nav, my section, and my footer are all basically the same, except for the section, I have gets the font family Poppins. Right? If you look, Poppins is not a font that you'll see, you know, if you go into Word or other software. It's a Google font. Now remember, we use this code up here to allow us to use a Google font. So let's Google how to use Google fonts. See all these examples. To use a Google font, you simply put the link into the right place, and then you use that font name just as you'd use a regular font. All right, this is the page I want. I think. That's doing essentially what we did in this example. Let's look at this. We try this. Let's look for a list of Google fonts. Here we go. We can look. There's Roboto, there's AFACAB, Flux, 64 Convergence, EDU Australia, and so on. So I can search for fonts. I can say, I want them to be the writing system. This if you were doing an international website. The language. Select English. A lot of different fonts. Different languages use different fonts for things. I could ask for sans serif fonts. Monospace means that each letter takes up the same amount of space as the others. And I can do a search. As I've been changing these things, it has done the search for me. So this is a monospace font used for English. There's one, there's one, there's one. Let's say I find one that I like. Say this one. I then click on it and it shows some sample text. Adjust the size. So you can see, because it's important how your font appears in different sizes. And I can click on Get Font and get embedded code, and it will show me what to do. This is what I wanted. These are the links that we need to put into the head section of our HTML. And this is what we would do in our CSS to make it have that particular font. Play around with this. If you have any difficulty at all, let me know. Now, in this case, I said that the section gets that rule. So if we notice, section has a slightly different font than, say, the footer. It might be a little hard to read, hard to determine the difference. I have a class of important. A class is indicated with a dot in the CSS file. And what that says is that's a different kind of selector. Remember what we said a selector is. A selector selects what on the page gets a style rule. So when we see dot important, that means anything that has a class of important gets that style rule. Because we might not literally want everything in the section to look a certain way. There might be some text that's more important. And therefore, we're going to say, well, we want that text to have a different style. How we can do it is we can give the class, give the item that we want a different style a class, and then define a CSS rule for that class. So if you notice now, everything that has a class of important is bold and is the color red. So we see this here. I could make the unordered list important. And then why did you spell it right? And then our unordered list gets red and bold. So a class you can define anywhere on the page that you need to. And everything within that element will get the CSS rule. Notice there's no dot when we assign a class to an HTML section. And notice I didn't say something like red bold text, because I might change how I indicate something's important. Maybe instead of changing it and making it bold and red, maybe I keep the color the same, but make it in italics and a bigger font. There's a lot of different ways we could indicate something is important. I chose red and bold. All right, but it would work just as well if I said, well, let's make this italic and a bigger font size. Nice thing about having this in our CSS file is if I can make that change in one place, everything that I've tagged as having a class of important will get the new style rule. Now, on the bottom, I have a pound sign. We've already seen the pound sign before when we created links. The pound sign indicates ID. An ID only points to one thing on the page. So I should not have two things with an ID of credits. Only one thing. Now, in this case, credits, I define the font size as being a little smaller, 0.7 em. That means 70% of the normal size. And I set the color of links within the ID of credits as being red. So if we notice our link within credits is the color red. So this is a different form of selector. We don't just say everything in credits. We say the links within credits. We're going to back up and look at the navigation in a minute here, and we'll see how we use that up there as well. Because we don't necessarily want everything in the navigation to look a certain way. We want the links in the navigation section to look a certain way. All right, let's look at the navigation. Now, we defined our style rule for the navigation. I then say nav UL. What does that mean? That means any UL within the nav section. So not this UL, because that's not within the nav section, but this UL is within the nav, I shouldn't say nav section, the nav tag. That gets the style rule. And what I've said is list style type none. That eliminates the bullet points. So notice if we look at this navigation, there's no bullet points before home, Hawaii, Iceland, Brazil, and so on. Nav LI, list style type, or that was on the UL. On nav LI, that is any LI within the nav section, the display is inline. Now, we talked about how there's two kinds of tags. Block tags which stack on top of each other and inline tags which stack side to side. What we're saying is normally an LI is a block tag. We're saying make it an inline tag. So instead of being a list like this, it's a list horizontally. I make the link a little smaller. I give it a border with a small radius, small padding. And I say the color of the link is blue. Where did I define? Oh, in the background, I put this is, I'll separate this into two lines. So the background of the link is # CCCCCC, which is a light gray, and the color of the text within the link is blue. So I get that for the link. Looks like a little button. I also have a left margin on the LIs too. That gives some separation between each of the links. Now, I have what are called pseudo classes for links. What they are links in a different state. So for example, if I hover over the link, I change the background to blue and make the color of the link white. So that's the normal style for the link. That's this style here. When I put my mouse over it, it changes. That makes it look like a little button. That gives a nice visual cue that you can actually click on these things. It's not always obvious that you can click on things, right? But by setting these setting these apart by looking like buttons, giving a visual indication that these are different than the other text on the page. Nowhere else on the page do I have text that looks like that. That indicates that, hey, these are probably links. Plus, users are used to seeing a navigation along the top of the page like this. So most users will pick up that these are intended to be links. And as we put our mouse on them, they change. Now I have 2 pages in my, or 3 pages, the home page, the Hawaii page, and the Iceland page. In my prototype, I can at least give someone an idea of what this will look like. Now, how much you do on the prototype is a balancing act. You don't want to do a complete finished page for your prototype because you might be spending too much time working on it and getting feedback that you're going to have to go back and change the page later on. So it's an idea to do some work, but not tons of work. You're just trying to give the person an idea of what the page is going to look like. Now, I was pretty skimpy on these prototypes. If I were doing this, I probably would put maybe a photo of Hawaii, maybe some little bit of text about Hawaii, some sample text, knowing that I might come back and change it, but at least giving the user an idea, this is what the Hawaii and Iceland page is going to look like. All right, play with these things. Go and make changes. Make sure you understand what everything in this CSS page means, everything in the CSS file means, and how it gets applied and how it works with the HTML to give a different view of the web page. Remember, all these things have defaults. But our CSS, we change the value of those defaults and get it to look the way we want it to look. We would then want to make our page, one of our goals would be to match our page to sort of the tone of, match the appearance of the page to sort of the tone of the content. Like travel is, vacations are good, right? Vacations are positive. Therefore, I try to make it a little bit lively by using this nice kind of green background. I wouldn't necessarily use a somber black and gray background for this because vacations are meant to be fun, are not meant to be that serious. I only used a couple colors. I used a little bit of blue here and a little bit of red there and there. All right, that's important. You don't want to overwhelm your users with colors. All right, a few different colors on the page helps the user identify what different sections of the page represent. If you use too many colors, then it's not clear what it means. It's obvious that this is red and bold. That means it should stand out. It's somehow different than all the other paragraphs. Whereas if each paragraph had its own color, then we would lose the sense that this paragraph is important. So, okay, we finished our template and CSS file. Our template should contain everything that's going to be common on every page. So I want to spend some time making sure my template is complete. Because if I start cloning this template, all right, then if I need to go back and change, like if I forgot to add the footer, I would need to go back and change all of the clones. Whereas right now it's just a template and I could just add it to one place. The CSS, I'm a little less concerned about having that perfect right off the bat because it's isolated in its own file. And if I want to change it, I change it in one file and it gets changed everywhere. So let's say, all right, I completed the template and I saved it. So I've already created an Iceland and Hawaii. Let's say I wanted to create a page for Brazil. I'm going to go copy template, paste it in here, rename it. Brazil. Go and change it. I'm just going to put in a little indication that this is the Brazil page. Save it. And now we have our Brazil page as well. Now, what that means is when you clone the template and edit the page, all you're going to change on each individual page is this one section. Because you want the other sections of the page to be uniform. You want them to be consistent between page to page. You want the navigation typically to be in the same place. Footer in the same place. Same information on every page in the footer. Same information on every page on the navigation. Ideally, you should be able to get to any of your pages from anywhere else. Don't simply have a link back to home. Have a full navigation on each page. But we do need to customize this section to make it specific to the page that we've just cloned. Okay, next time we're going to go over some other prototypes. Like, for example, prototype 2 is almost the same, except we've made the width variable. So as a page gets wider, these sections get wider. That's actually a fairly simple change. I put in a width to be 75%. I can then put a minimum width to say, hey, even if the page gets small, don't make the width of this any smaller than 550 pixels. This is actually probably a better way because it takes advantage of people with wider screens. So usually when you use percent, it's okay to use number of pixels for minimum width. And then again, all of these have the same setting for that, for width and minimum width. Now, every prototype that we're going to examine in this section is going to have the same HTML code with maybe one exception. I don't remember, but it's basically the same HTML code. This shows the power of CSS, where we can take a web page with certain HTML and make it look a bunch of different ways. So for example, we'll talk about this more next time. Model 3, prototype 3, looks totally different. This is the same HTML as this. We've just formatted it differently. And that's a great thing to be able to do, because then if you want to give your site a refresh, you don't have to change every single page. You just change the one CSS file and all the pages on your site gets that change. Okay, that's all I have for today. Are there any questions? All right, if there are no questions, we'll either see you in lab or see you next week.